Hello there, I am Carson, and I just finished reading The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This book is filled with relatable characters and excellent writing that keeps you engaged throughout the entire 293 pages of the novel. The novel is split into 3 books, which makes the whole thing feel like a movie or a 3-act play. The book starts off by showing the state of the world at the time, with the first words of the book being the famous lines, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." The book then heads to a carriage, where we meet Mr. Jarvis Lorry, an old businessman who cares a lot about his friends and family. The carriage is later stopped by Mr. Jerry Cruncher, a grumpy, odd-job man, who is trying to deliver a letter to Mr. Lorry from Lucy Minette, the daughter of one of his old friends, Alexander/Dr. Minette. Mr. Lorry then meets up with Lucy, a young and caring woman who thinks her father, a man who she believes to have died when she was young, left land to her in his will. But after some explaining by Mr. Lorry, she realizes that he has been alive and wrongfully imprisoned in the Bastille for the last 18 years. Mr. Lorry and Lucy then head to Paris, where they meet Madame and Monsieur Defarge, 2 wine shop owners/revolutionaries that are taking care of Lucy's father, Dr. Minette, after he was released from prison. After 18 years of wrongful imprisonment, Dr. Minette, a normally kind and caring old man, has gone senile and is constantly making shoes, but is somewhat brought back when he reconnects with his daughter. The 3 of them then head back to London, ending Book 1. Book 1 is a great start to the story. The first and last chapter really got me engaged in the story. 5 years have passed since the end of Book 1 and the start of Book 2. We start off this chapter with the treason trial of Charles Darnay, an honorable Frenchman that Mr. Lorry and the Minettes met on their boat ride back to London. The testimonies of Dr. Minette and Lucy Minette, along with the appearance of Sidney Carton, a drunk who looks surprisingly similar to Darnay, the testifier's evidence falls apart and Darnay is set free. 4 months have passed and Darnay visits Marquis d'Evremond, a French noble who's actually Darnay's uncle. Darnay then explains to Marquis that he's denouncing his will and that he doesn't want to be connected with the family name because of their treatment of the commoners. Another year has passed, and Darnay confesses his love of Lucy to her father, Dr. Minette. Carton also confesses his feelings to Lucy, and tells her that she makes him want to be a better man. He then asks her to never tell anyone about what he said, and that he will do the same. Some time passes, and Lucy and Darnay get married, which causes Dr. Minette to relapse about his time in prison, but Mr. Lorry and Miss Pross, the Minette's housekeeper, keep it a secret from Lucy and Darnay. Several years have passed, and Lucy and Darnay have had 2 children, with their eldest sadly dying at a young age. Mr. Carton has also gotten really close with the family, which helps him develop a better outlook on life. The French Revolution finally begins, as Madame and Monsieur Defarge lead an attack on the Bastille. After the battle, Monsieur Defarge heads to Dr. Minette's old cell and grabs a hidden letter. After 3 years of chaos in France, Mr. Lorry is sent to the Paris branch of Tellson's bank to ensure the safety of the bank's assets. Darnay then gets a letter addressed to the nephew of Marquis d'Evremond from the Marquis's servant, stating that he was arrested for dealing with the deceased Marquis's assets after Darnay denounced his will. While on his way to testify for the servant, Darnay gets arrested for being an immigrant. Book 2 was probably the lesser of the 3 books, because it was the longest and the middle of this chapter was a bit uneventful. However, Darnay's trial, the attack on the Bastille, and Darnay's imprisonment kept me engaged throughout the roughest chapters of the book. Book 3 starts with Lucy, Dr. Minette, and Lucy and Darnay's daughter, whose name is also Lucy, arriving in Paris to save Darnay. Because of Dr. Minette's reputation of being wrongfully imprisoned by the nobles, Dr. Minette was able to reason with the guards of the forced prison to keep Darnay alive. Over a year has passed, and the Minettes are still waiting for the day they can free Darnay and escape France. Over that time, Dr. Minette has become the top physician in 3 prisons, allowing him to keep an eye on Darnay while he is still locked up. The day of Darnay's trial finally arrives, with him being accused as an immigrant for moving to England. But Darnay explains that the only reason why he went to England was because that he had nothing in France, that the woman he married in England, Lucy, is French, and that the reason he came back to France was because he was trying to save another Frenchman from death. Darnay is then set free, and is carried out of the courthouse by the audience and the jury. But luck was sadly not on his side, as only hours after he was freed from prison, Darnay was arrested again by Monsieur Defarge, Madame Defarge, and an unknown accuser. While in the Defarge's wine shop, Miss Pross and Jerry Cruncher, who also came to France, find Mr. Barsad, who's revealed to be an English spy by Mr. Carton, who's also now in France. Mr. Carton then blackmails Mr. Barsad, and makes up a plan to save Darnay. When his trial came the next day, the unknown accuser was revealed to be Dr. Manette, when Monsieur Defarge took out a hidden letter that was from Dr. Manette's cell that tells the story of how Dr. Manette was arrested. One day, while walking back home, Dr. Manette was asked by a noble in a carriage to save a woman who was ill. While tending to her, the nobles who requested him gave him another patient, a young man, who revealed to Dr. Manette that the woman he was treating was his sister, and that she was also taken by the nobles. The man then tells Dr. Manette that he hid his younger sister and went to kill the one responsible for his first sister's disappearance. The man and the woman later die of their wounds and illness. Dr. Manette then meets with a young Darnay and his mother, who wants to make amends for their family killing the two commoners, but Dr. Manette is unable to help. Dr. Manette then decides to report what he saw to the government, but is caught by the nobles, and he is arrested. Dr. Manette then curses the Evrémonde family, and wishes for them to perish, for what they have done to him and those commoners. After reading the letter, the jury unanimously votes against Darnay, and he is set to be executed. While in the Defarge's wine shop, Mr. Carton then overhears Madame Defarge's plan to kill Dr. Manette, Lucy, and Lucy Jr., as they are technically part of the Evrémonde line. She plans on doing this by catching them grieving about Darnay's death, as grieving over a criminal's death is a crime. Madame Defarge then reveals that she is the sister that was hidden away by the man killed by the nobles in Dr. Manette's letter. After the trial has ended, Dr. Manette starts to relapse, but while trying to comfort him, Mr. Carton finds tickets that will allow the Manettes to leave France. Mr. Carton then explains what he overheard to Mr. Lorry and tells him to get everyone ready to leave France tomorrow. Mr. Carton then gives Mr. Lorry his own tickets. The next day, Mr. Carton visits Darnay's cell and tells him to switch clothes with him. Carton then drugs Darnay and gets Mr. Barsad to send him to the carriage that the Manettes are leaving on. While preparing to leave, Miss Pross finds Madame Defarge at the door of the Manette's house, searching for evidence against the Manettes. After figuring out what the Manettes are doing, Madame Defarge then goes out to find them, but Miss Pross is able to grab her. While trying to break free, Madame Defarge accidentally shoots herself, and Miss Pross hides the body in the Manettes' old home. It is finally Mr. Carton's turn on the guillotine after switching places with Darnay. Carton thinks to himself about the Manettes and Lucy. He imagines that the Defarges are brought to justice. He then imagines that Darnay and Lucy have another child named after him, and that the child will do great things that Mr. Carton could not have done in his own life. The book then ends with Mr. Carton thinking to himself, "It is a far, far better thing that I have done than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." Book 3 is definitely the best book out of the 3 books. It has the most events in the book, the most twists, and the best part. These final chapters made the book 100% worth reading. I believe the main themes of this book are sacrifice and perseverance. I believe that sacrifice is one of the main themes because of everything the characters sacrificed to create the novel. There is Dr. Manette sacrificing his life of his wife and daughter to report the unjust actions of the Marquise. Darnay sacrificing his well-being to testify for his uncle's old servant in France. The Manettes sacrificing their safety in England to save Darnay. And when Carton sacrificed everything to allow Darnay and the Manettes to escape France. Perseverance is also shown in the novel by Dr. Manette making it out of the Bastille, and the Manettes' struggle to save Darnay and leave France. In conclusion, I would recommend this book to anyone as the characters are great, the writing is amazing, and the story is filled with many twists that will keep you engaged throughout the entire 293 pages of the novel. And since the book is in the public domain, there are many different ways to experience the story.